Welcome to the very first class of this year's Rosh Chodesh Society series. Welcome back to those of you who have been here before, and welcome to all the new faces. It's really nice to see you all here. The series is called Art and Soul. And the idea behind this series is exploring various art forms and uncovering the deeper aspect of what the artist tries to achieve in each of these art forms. And through doing that, through looking beyond the superficial, looking beyond the literal expression of the art form to the deeper sense of it, we will find that we are actually all artists or musicians or dancers or architects or whatever the art form is when we apply that deeper element to our own lives. So tonight, the very first course, we will be looking at the art of painting and drawing. What you may discover tonight is that you are an artist. You can paint, you can draw, perhaps not literally, and you do not need to know how to literally draw or paint to be in this class, and the same goes for all the subsequent classes. But in a different sense, you may just discover the innate artist within you. So let us start with a question. What is art supposed to achieve? And I'm going to open this up for discussion. No wrong or right answers.
Well, I'll just like to share. I find when I'm in a creative process, I feel very close to God. Like I feel I'm connecting to a higher energy, a divine energy. Sometimes it just feels like it's coming from a place that's bigger than me.
Beautiful. So you're saying there is a godly or a spiritual element to art or to creating?
For me, yes, very much so, yes. Like time fly, like you don't even notice time.
Right.
Sometimes I'm just so deep in the process that when it's over I go, did I do this? So it's almost like there's something bigger than me happening.
That's very interesting that you're saying that, because we'll discuss this more at length in the class. But from what I understand, I'm not an artist myself, but what an artist tries to do when he or she paints an object is to find the soul of the object or the soul of the person if you're doing a portrait or whatever it is. So that ties in beautifully. That's a very nice thought that you brought up. Thank you. What else?
I think it also tries to achieve meaning. So when you express some type of art, you try to portray your emotion. So whatever, if this is the painting that I created, the emotion behind it, it's what will give my life some meaning. Like I'm trying to express that emotion in something more physical instead of just ideas. And I guess it ties in with the meaning of what's behind not only the artist, but the person that's looking at the art itself.
Right.
Because, art can mean different things to different people,
True.
right? So it just kind of tries to grab the meaning of whatever it is you're feeling in that moment.
Okay, thank you. Beautiful. So you're saying another element to art, or what art achieves, is meaning.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, good. What else may art be trying to achieve?
I think that in terms of creation as us being created beings, we our job is to reveal the godliness within creation, which was concealed, and then through art we can also reveal the godliness within other aspects of things in the same way that we create in order for things to be revealed, different whatever emotions, ideas within.
Exactly. Beautiful. So there's a, not only is an artist coming up with their own meaning necessarily, but there perhaps is some kind of godly meaning as well, like you're saying, Sydney, in what the artist is trying to depict. If I understood what you said correctly, is that right? Very nice.
For me, as art is a process, different things reveal themselves about myself and about what the product reveals back along the way. And I mean, if I had to link it now, what a thought that came to me is sort of like at the different level of the worlds. And in there, it's not always pleasant, my own experience. Sometimes it's a struggle. And sometimes I'm surprised by what happens because it's very much an interaction. And I mean, ultimately, it's like trying to seek truth and beauty, even though beauty may be awesome in a way that is not in what we think of as beauty. But it's when I feel in the end that there's something there, it's really an interaction, and it's more than I can be by myself or it can be by itself. And that's probably why art relates to different people in different ways too, because there's that interaction in any art form, whether it's a visual art or tactile art, like any form.
So you're saying there's an interaction between the artist and the art,
And
as well as all the elements used within the art.
Also at different levels of the world, like yes, physically, emotionally, on a level of transformation, on a level of something spiritual, at different times, different things. It's part of the whole process.
Right.
Being human and being in the creative process.
I like that word you use, interaction. He also mentioned a few other things, which we will picked up on some key words, actually, concepts that we're going to develop tonight. You mentioned, first of all, how how art is self-expression, a form of self-expression. That's definitely, I believe, one of the objectives of art in terms of the artist, him or herself, is that element of self-expression. You mentioned also about the emotions within the artist. There's something there that the artist is expressing. You also mentioned there's the element of beauty in art that the artist is bringing out and connecting to, as well as the element of meaning you mentioned, and Bella, you mentioned that as well. So these are all excellent ideas, and I'm sure there are many, many answers to this question, and I'm sure different people have different answers, and different answers that speak to different people differently. What we'll do for this class is we are going to narrow down the elements of art to two different elements, both of which you ladies had mentioned. One is the idea that art expresses beauty, and the other is this idea that art expresses meaning. It expresses an idea. So let's begin. We will start with the element of meaning in art. And as part of our discussion, we are going to be doing a little workshop and a bit of interactive learning to start off with. Okay? So please help yourself to 2 papers and a pen. Here, let me pass these down, and if you need more, I have more. There's some pens you can pass down as well. And Bella, can I ask you please just to place this somewhere in the middle? Exactly. Thank you. Perfect.
Sorry, I'm just going to drag it a little bit. Is that blocking the camera? Would that be blocking? Maybe.
It may be a little. We'll take it off after this exercise. I'm not going to leave it there for the whole class. Our voices will still come through. So. Okay, again, I want to reiterate, do not worry if you can't draw. Really, in a way, this exercise may work even better if you can't draw. So anyone could do this. Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do now is try to draw this menorah in the center of the table. When you are done with your drawing, I'll give you 2 minutes. When you are done, label that paper as drawing A and put it aside. Further instructions will be coming afterwards.
You
Go
want
ahead.
From our angle? Or what would
However
be
you
best
like.
that it would be?
However you like.
No marking. Do I sign my name?
You don't. You don't even have to show it to anyone. Okay. Label that drawing A and put it aside, please. Don't worry if it's not perfect. It's fine. For the purpose of this exercise, it's great. All right. Now take your second paper. And once again, you are going to draw this menorah, but without looking at your paper. Again, I'll give you 2 minutes. Go for it, and then label that paper drawing B.
Without looking at what?
Without looking at your paper that you're drawing on.
You look at the menorah, but not at your paper.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
It's hard not to look.
A little tip, it might help if you don't lift your pen from the paper. If you don't lift the pen from the paper at all. Keep the pen on the paper.
I'm sure my wax would drip all over if I used this one.
Well, it's your interpretation of the menorah, right?
Yours would burn.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Keep that thought. I'm going to repeat that for everybody after. It's a good point.
Don't look at it.
I don't know where I am. I know I'm also lost.
Okay, and stop and label this drawing B. Now, place your drawings side by side in front of you. And turn to page 4, please, in your student book. What you will find there on page 4 is a short questionnaire as a follow-up to this exercise that you have just done. Question number 1. Which of the 2 drawings do you find to be more artistic? And then explain your choice. I see this drawing as more artistic because in my eyes it is more, and choose one or more of the following words: beautiful, spiritual, meaningful, creative, thought-provoking, deep, or any other thing, any other thought. Would anyone like to share?
I can share.
Please.
So
Go ahead.
to me, drawing B, it's more artistic, only because it follow my instinct of creating something that I can see, and then I can interpret the meaning of it, and then I can just I forgot the word. Just kind of put it in the paper. Just kind of, it's something more abstract. If that has any, I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but
I feel exactly the same.
right, like
Really?
it's something that's an idea, and then you just kind of
I would just add 2 more words. It's spontaneous and it's free.
yes, it's completely
Well
free
said.
because it's not, you're not tied.
But you explained it very well.
Yeah, you're not tying your visual with
Yeah,
whatever.
you're allowing.
Yeah, in my case, it
Rather
flow
than
much better than me looking at it and in detail trying to control whatever I see.
Well,
So that would be.
and it's interesting, it's not one of the choices, but I noticed when I look at my one that I wasn't looking, it evokes feeling. Like I feel it's coming almost more from the emotional body.
Yes.
I mean, there's something more childlike about it because it's off center. It's, you know, it's
Yes.
not perfect. But somehow when I look at it, it kind of warms my heart. The other one is an attempt to be, you know, perfectly aligned and perfectly representational and perfectly, and of course I didn't succeed. So there's a bit of like anxiety that it doesn't really look like what it's supposed to look like.
That's the trouble.
Where this really felt like I look at it and it just makes my heart happy. I go, well, it is a menorah, I can tell.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
And I
and
say
you
I
can-
wouldn't use it because the wax would fall all over. But it
That's what makes it
brings-
artistic.
It just brings up
Yeah.
feelings. Because I find it's the feeling. For me, art has always been about the feeling body
Yes.
in a lot of ways. So I did find the second way did that for me. Yeah. How about
So
some
it's-
others? Do you have a similar experience or no? Yes, no.
Anyone have a different experience?
I think that you look more at what you're drawing when you're not always looking at your picture and trying to like add up angles and different things. Like you're able to look at it and like realize where the shadows and the reflections are in the surface, like the different tonal values. Whereas like if you're just trying to like get out your composition, you're not like looking into the details of the object.
Did anyone find their first drawing to be more artistic? No right or wrong answers, ladies. Whatever you feel.
No, but my second one was more balanced.
Really?
Yeah.
it is.
Interesting.
You're actually on the right spot.
So it seems like most of you find your second picture to be more artistic when you weren't looking at your paper, and it's very interesting. And as you all explained it so beautifully, Aura, Bella, Barbara, Sydney, you know, you're not getting hung up by the details on your paper. And like you said, you know, the lines and the measurements and the, you know, the the technical details. When you're looking at your paper, you're trying to get it all right. So when you're just looking at the object, you're looking more with your inner eye. And you're looking more to the soul of the object, and you're doing it more from how you feel about the object and how the object looks to you, and you're not getting hung up on or distracted by what's emerging on your paper and, oh, it doesn't look quite right, and things like that. And it's interesting, this is apparently an exercise that art teachers use to teach their students how to let go of preconceived notions. It doesn't have to look exactly as you see it. The picture on your paper, it's okay if it's not exactly the same. Just look, think with your inner eye, with your emotions, with different parts of you, and put that down on the paper. And that's what an artist does. When an artist paints, the artist is looking at something beyond what we might see when we're just looking at an object on any given day. The artist sees the soul of the object or the experience or the scene, whatever it may be, and brings that out in the painting. Ora, you wanted to say something?
I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, and it's so funny that you just said that, because I was going to say just the opposite. I was going to say, isn't it ironic that in a lot of art classes you go to, they're very much focusing on technique, and yet most of us had a more powerful experience from just allowing ourselves to be free and spontaneous.
Except when you actually, depending on the course, it can be about getting the gesture, the essence of it. It can be just 2 or 3 lines, not all the detail. It's our mind that looks at the details instead of taking in the whole essence of the picture, which is really what art is about. Is about feeling the whole experience, not just the little minutia parts. So it's very powerful. Bella, can I ask you to take the menorah off now? I think we're done with it, pretty much. There's a quote by Aristotle.
Thank you.
You have it in your student books, actually. The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. And I think to really get this, best is to experience it, to see it for ourselves. So on that note, I'm going to present you with a number of slides. And we'll try and grasp the saying of Aristotle for ourselves.
I like that one. The first one.
Yes, you have all these pictures in your book as well. Here they're in color. I'm going to start off by showing you a number of slides, different depictions of trees. Actually, Sydney, the first is a photograph.
Wow.
Yeah, and the other ones are paintings. So I'll show them all to you, and then we can discuss it a bit. Can everyone see? Yeah. Let's see better if you do it this way. Some are going one way, others going another way.
I didn't realize we did a tree library.
That might be the last tree. Yep. So here we have paintings. Van Gogh did this one. See better like that.
It does look much nicer in color.
Yes, of course.
No doubt.
That's the one by Van Gogh. So same object, and they're all beautiful. But it's interesting how in each picture, there's something else being shown to us through the work of the artist.
Would you mind going back one?
Sure.
The one before?
This one? And, if we would go outside now and look at a tree, we probably wouldn't see any of these ideas that we see here in these slides and these paintings. Because, as we've shown, painting, art, depicts something beyond what we see with our superficial vision. And we see that here in all the different paintings of the trees. Each one is bringing out a different, showing us something different about the tree.
We see, if we were to look at the Van Gogh, it reminds me of what Barbara was talking about. Because of the color and whatever, it seems to be the tree
Go back to that one.
relationship also to everything around it. You know, some are more solitary, so the focus is just the tree. This has the blue sky, it's got the grass, it has the light, the reflection of the light. Like, so, like we were talking, like Barbara was saying, sometimes it's the interaction of the object with what's around it. Sometimes
right.
it's just an aspect of the object itself, or in isolation.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to another slide. This one is by Picasso. And it actually really expresses something that Picasso himself is known for saying. There is only one way to see things until someone shows us how to look at them with different eyes. And I think he's really doing this in this painting. This painting is called The Weeping Woman. How many of you have seen a weeping woman, a real weeping woman? Probably, you know, all of us more than once. We've been one ourselves. But how many of you have actually seen this deep inner turmoil of the weeping woman? And this is something that the artist is bringing out in this picture.
So different in color, this one.
Isn't that amazing? You know, when we look at a woman weeping, you know, it's real time. You think, wow, this is the real experience. But there's so much we don't see.
Yeah.
And the artist shows us what we're not seeing. This is the different eyes that Picasso's talking about. We think we know what something looks like, and then all of a sudden we're shown a different view through art. One last example. What we have here, side by side, we have a photograph and a self-portrait. Okay, now, it's almost certain that this photograph is of Van Gogh. The self-portrait certainly is. And by the way, they're both the same year. The photograph was taken the same year as the drawing was done. So most people assume it is the same person. And look at the difference between the photograph and the painting. It's obvious it's the same person. But where do you see the personality?
Or his
Right.
perception of himself.
Yes.
Yes.
It's his perception.
That's right. So again, so much beyond the surface that we don't necessarily see by looking at the real object, or the live object.
Yeah, you can see inspiration, you can see loneliness and anxiety on his self-portrait, which is probably what he was feeling.
Right. Let's go back to what you were saying before, that an artist
Yeah.
often expresses their own emotion through the painting, and how much more so it's a self-portrait. So when we talk about art expressing meaning or expressing an idea, that's what we just experienced. The artist tries to bring out a deeper meaning, a meaning beyond the surface, beneath the surface that we don't necessarily see ourselves. That is one very important objective of art. Let's move on now to the other element of art that we mentioned before, which is the element of beauty. And I'd like to start off by looking at this element of beauty through the eyes of Judaism. Let me ask you like this. Is beauty a Jewish value? We know that Judaism puts a lot of emphasis on morality, on ethics, on philosophies, ideas. What about beauty? Totally. Okay. Why?
The whole concept of Shabbat is beautiful.
Where do you see beauty in Shabbat? Could you give us an example?
You set a beautiful table, you use beautiful dishes, you put on your nice clothes, you're welcoming angels into your home. I mean, it's you take the physical and you bring it to another level of awe and
Very good example. It's a
Also,
perfect
like,
example.
physical, like with modesty, like dressing nicely, but like in a modest way, but still like looking presentable. Also, the Rebbe was like very, like he always encouraged girls to like have mirrors and to like make sure that they look like nice. Put together.
Okay, very good example. And we're actually going to touch on this idea a little bit further on, this concept of physical beauty and its place in Judaism. It's also a very good idea.
Outer beauty and inner beauty. So inner beauty is an important concept.
Beautiful. That is true. But what about physical beauty? Are there more, okay, so, or you mentioned Shabbat. Are there more examples of the importance or the place of physical beauty in Judaism?
I'd like to share with you a story, if I may, just a short one that just never left me. I grew up in a very beautiful home. My mother probably could have been a very successful artist, but because of her time, she sort of channeled it all into the home and cooking and whatever. So our home was always very beautiful. And I remember, and she was actually quite fastidious about it.
That's a form of art as well, by the way.
That's
A
what
beautiful home.
It was, yes, it was her form. I felt it was like her socially acceptable form of art. But I remember one day she told me that the reason she was so house proud was she wanted to feel that at any moment God would ring her bell and she would feel proud to welcome him into her home. And that touched me so deeply. I mean, it really said a lot about my mother, I felt. So for me, I mean, I know deep in my heart that God would meet you in a hovel, you know, in a cave full of mud. But it was just a beautiful idea of her desire to welcome God into a place of beauty.
And you know what? That's right on the mark, because God does want beauty from us. God does obviously appreciate beauty, and like you say, you know, he'll form a relationship with us even if the beauty's absent, but he definitely prefers a relationship where there's beauty.
Because it reminds us of who we are, I feel. Like, don't you ever feel like in the face of beauty, even in or outer, I mean, it could be such kindness or such love, anything, it just reminds you of how beautiful you are. I don't know, it puts me in a place of awe, I find. Look at a sunset. Or look at
That was what I wanted to mention. I mean, just look at the world around us. Never mind us. Look the world God created. It's not just a functional place.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's a beautiful place, unparalleled beauty. So, you know, if the creator of the world, God, put beauty into the world, there must be beauty must be a value in Judaism. That's number one. That's a good starting point right there.
Yay.
Yeah, absolutely. Another interesting thing, if we go back in our history, we see how much God really values our contribution of beauty and our expression of beauty. If you take a look in your student book, see what page it's on in your books. It's a little bit different in mine. I believe it's on page 22. Are any of you familiar with the term Mishkan? Have you ever heard that term, Mishkan? The tabernacle? It's the English translation of the word. What we have here in this text, text 2:1, excuse me.
Excuse me, the Mishkan is the tabernacle?
Yes.
The tabernacle are the tablets, or the tabernacle is the ark?
The tabernacle housed the ark, which housed the tablets.
Okay, that's the Mishkan.
The Mishkan. The Mishkan.
housed the ark, because it says here about the tent of meeting.
Yes, we're going to read this.
Okay.
Yes, the Mishkan, just in brief, was a structure the Jewish people put together in the desert. After they left Egypt, they were wandering the desert for 40 years before they arrived to the land of Israel. And God instructed them to build this tabernacle, to build this Mishkan, which served as the meeting place between heaven and earth, so to speak. In other words, this was the physical place on earth where God communicated with the Jewish people through the leader, through Moshe. This was the temple. In other words, the temple in Jerusalem was sort of the continuation. It was a more permanent expression of what the Mishkan was accomplishing in the desert. The Mishkan was a temporary structure. It was assembled and disassembled all the time, depending on when the Jews were actually traveling, and it was portable. They carried it with them. Exactly. Although I'm sure it was pretty heavy, but nonetheless, you could take it apart and put it together relatively easily. So what we have here in the text is God's request of the Jewish people through Moshe to build this Mishkan. Would anybody like to read this out loud? Any volunteers?
God spoke to Moses, saying, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I have filled him with a divine spirit, with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship." Barb, you want to take over?
To design designs, to fashion in gold and silver and brass, and in the carving and setting of stone, and in the carving of wood, to fashion in all manner of workmanship. And here I have given with him Eliab, the son of Aishmach, of the tribe of Dan.
Ahisamach.
Aishmach of the tribe of Dan. And in the heart of all the wise of heart I have given wisdom, and they shall make all which I have commanded, the tent of meeting, and the ark of the testimony, and the cover that is upon it, and all the vessels of the tent.
Okay, thank you. So what's really striking here is that just as the world, God didn't ask just for a functional structure. He requested a beautiful structure, as we see. Yeah, with gold and silver, brass, all kinds of woven materials, different colors. It was really a beautiful, beautiful structure, a beautiful building, if we can call it a building, a temporary building. And there's a couple of terms here that I'd like to highlight just for a moment to show the extent of how much God really wanted human creativity involved in this project. One phrase here, to design designs. In Hebrew, it's lachshov machshavot, to design designs. One of the commentaries on the Chumash, the Ibn Ezra, he explains this to mean to take initiative, to be innovative and creative. God wanted Bezalel, who was the head of the project, and his team, all the different artists involved, to innovate, to be creative, to come up with new ideas, to really express their artistic selves through the making of the Mishkan. Another interesting term here is this idea of wise of heart. Usually when we think of wise, we think of wise of mind, right? The intellect. But here the Torah is using this expression, wise of heart. And this is expressing the idea that God wanted the artists to express what was in their hearts, to put their emotions into the creating of the Mishkan. Again, their creativity, their emotions, that artistic part of themselves deep within them should be expressed through the building of the Mishkan. So we see clearly here, through the command of building the Mishkan, that God loves our creativity, loves our innovation, loves our artistry, and values it and wants us to implement all that in our lives and in all the good that we do in this world. Which brings me to the next point. Because the Mishkan was actually a prototype for what we want to accomplish in the world at large. The Mishkan was essentially a microcosm of our world. Just as the Mishkan was this place of communication between God and the Jewish people, what God wants of us is to make the whole world a place of communication between God and us. To make this world a place where God's divinity is expressed and revealed, where God's power is revealed, just as in the Mishkan. And just as in the Mishkan, God wanted this done in a beautiful way, so too in our mission of making this world a more godly place, God wants that done in a beautiful way as well. Not just functional, but beautiful, glorious, artistic. Let's take a look at text 3a. Does anyone have it in their student book?
24.
24? Okay. When the Jewish people left Egypt, you know the famous story. Anya, did you want to mention something? Go ahead.
I read this, the letter to the press artist.
Oh, yes.
And I have a friend she's not Jewish, but she's an artist, and she's already quite big in Vancouver. And she told me about her sometimes raw feelings, and then I gave her this letter.
Really?
And it really helped her. Yeah.
That's amazing. We're actually going to read that letter together in a little while, so we'll hold that thought, because that's really incredible. So when the Jews left Egypt, we all know the famous story of the crossing of the Red Sea. While the Jews were walking across the dry land, they burst forth with this expression, part of their song actually, part of the Song of the Sea, where they're giving thanks to God for this great miracle. And they burst forth and say, Ze Keli Va'anvehu, this is my God, and I shall beautify him. Beautify him is the most common, most literal explanation for the word Ve'anvehu. But Rashi, who's the foremost commentator on the Chumash, he says there's an additional meaning as well to this word Ve'anvehu. Text 3b. Rashi quotes from Onkelos. Onkelos explains the entire text of the Torah in Aramaic, which was the language at the time. And Rashi is telling us that Onkelos translates this word as home, that the word Ve'anvehu is linked to the Hebrew word, shares a root with the Hebrew word naveh, which means home. And another meaning to this word is how we just translated. Rashi tells us the sense of beauty. Beauty in Hebrew, one word for beauty in Hebrew is noi. That's spelled nun vav yud. Again, it shares a root with this word ve'anvehu. So we could explain ve'anvehu as home. We could explain it as beauty. But it's not until the Jews received the command to build the Mishkan that we see how these two meanings are in fact interrelated. Because when God wants us to build him a home, which is what we are busy doing, we want to make this world a place where God can live, where God can be found, where God can be comfortable. When it comes to building God a home, we want it to be a beautiful home, not just a functional home. And how do we do that?
So now we're talking home in many ways. Like,
Yes.
At first we talked about a home like where we dwell, but now you're talking about almost earths as home.
Yes.
Or, you know.
Yes, a home for God. Absolutely. And the truth is that this whole concept of making a place for God, it is done in the world at large, but it's also something we do in our own personal homes, in our own personal selves. We want God to dwell within us. We want God to dwell within our immediate environment, within our home, within our workplace, and of course within the world. And therefore, as we will discuss a little bit more further on, everything we do should be with that idea in mind, that I'm doing this because I want this to be part of my relationship with God. I want this to express my relationship with God in my life.
Not even also in your heart, but to say in your mind and in your heart.
Exactly. And that is through the mitzvot. The mitzvot are how we form a relationship with God. God asks us to do certain things for him. When we give to somebody in a relationship, that's how you form a relationship. It's the same thing with God. When we do God's mitzvot, we are forming this relationship, and we're bringing God into our lives, into our homes, into the world, and making this a godly world. But how do we make it beautiful? So that's what text 3c is going to tell us. It's an excerpt from the Gemara, from the Talmud. Take a quick look at it. How do we make God a beautiful home? In the words of the Talmud, you can paraphrase it. Well, we could do a mitzvah and we could do a mitzvah, right? I have a good example right here. We're told to light a menorah on Hanukkah for 8 days to commemorate the miracle. Well, we can just take 8 tea lights and line them up, and we've done the mitzvah. Or we can have a beautiful piece of art as our menorah and do it that way. And every mitzvah truly could be enhanced in a beautiful way. And so in that way, not only are we making God a home, not only are we inviting God in to our lives, but it's also a beautiful home.
So would you actually go so far to say that making things beautiful is actually another layer of sacredness?
Yes, yes. Every single thing in this world, everything that God created, is here for a purpose. It's here to be part of our relationship with God. And that includes objects of beauty. So when we use those objects of beauty in creating this relationship with God and doing a mitzvah, we involve it in that mitzvah, we include it in a mitzvah. That's what it was here for in the first place. And that beauty is a real value. And when God tells us he wants a beautiful world, he wants us to use the beauty in the world. He wants us to tap into it and to use it for good things. But, question, why? Why does God want beauty? Going back to the menorah, for example. We need to commemorate the miracle. So we light a menorah. If we line up 8 tea lights, the miracle was commemorated. What is really the difference if we light 8 tea lights in a row or if we light this beautiful menorah? Now, of course, we like beauty. We're attracted to beauty. We love to surround ourselves with beauty. We enjoy beauty. But our relationship with God is not really about what we enjoy. It's about what God's asking us to put into this relationship with him. So why does God care if we're lighting a beautiful menorah or a plain menorah? The menorah is getting lit. We're creating a relationship regardless.
No, it feels better. It's just,
Feels better to who? To us.
I mean, to us, yeah.
But so what? It's not about feel good. It's about creating a relationship with God.
So you feel better, you feel you can serve better.
Aha. So you're saying it inspires us, and so then we want to do more. Okay, good, beautiful.
To put in more effort, more financial resources.
Okay, good. So the more effort we put in, it shows we value our relationship more.
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps, yes, we're demonstrating something to God by
Like,
doing
willing
things
to,
in a beautiful way.
Invest like financially in it as well, not just
Mhm.
time-wise.
Okay, good.
Sanctifies it by making it special. Out of the
Okay.
ordinary.
True. These are all excellent answers. What I would like to do now is take it one step further, or one step deeper, and perhaps redefine the meaning of beauty. To look a little bit deeper into the concept of beauty. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to tie together those 2 elements of art that we've spoken about so far. Meaning and beauty. Okay, ready? Okay, here we go. What is beauty? Well, when everything's the same, it's not so beautiful. A painting that's all one color, not so beautiful. A song that's all one note, not so beautiful.
Still $1 billion.
True, but we're talking about beauty.
A Russian bird or
That's true. That's a different element of art, 100%. A story that's using the same sentence structure and the same vocabulary, the same ideas repeating over and over, not so beautiful. What creates beauty is diversity. A combination of things, different things. Yet diversity is not enough. because diversity could also lead to divisiveness. It could lead to discord. It could lead to a clash. What we really need to create beauty is harmony. Different elements interacting well together, coming together properly, creating a whole picture. So whether it's in art, you have different colors interacting well together to create a beautiful picture. Whether it's in music, you have the different notes that complement each other to create a beautiful piece of music. Whether it's in a community, we have a community made up of all different types of people, different types of personalities, but if they're all at each other's throats all the time and the community's full of politics, it's not a beautiful community. But if all those different personalities complement each other and work well together, interact well together, there you have a beautiful community. So beauty really is different elements, diversity that comes together in harmony. And here's where we tie together those two elements of art, meaning and beauty. Because what it boils down to is that meaning, also known as truth, creates harmony, which is also known as beauty. In other words, the key to beauty is meaning. Now, I'm going to use the terms meaning and truth synonymously, because after all, what meaning is all about is to uncover a deeper truth. When we look for meaning, we're looking for the deeper truth. So for the purposes of our class in this context, they're interchangeable terms. Okay? So the key to beauty is meaning. Let's develop this further. Truth and beauty often don't seem to go together very well. We often think about beauty as a cover-up or a facade or superficial or fake. And we tend to think of truth as raw, sharp. We call it the ugly truth, ugly versus beautiful. It's not necessarily something we want to face. And in fact, there is a text in the Torah that seems to support this concept that perhaps truth and beauty are antithetical to each other. Perhaps they do not work well together. Take a look at text text 5a. This is a very famous passage from Proverbs, the Eshet Chayil. Otherwise known as the woman of valor. Towards the end of the Eshet Chayil passage, we have a phrase that reads as follows: grace is false and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears God, she is to be praised. In other words, what does this verse seem to be telling us? There's truth and there's beauty. Which is praiseworthy? Truth, integrity. What's going on the inside? Her fear of God, her belief system, her value system. That's what's praiseworthy. But grace, beauty, it's vain. But that's at first glance. Let's take a second glance at this very same passage. We're going to look at an interpretation by the Gaon of Vilna, otherwise known as the Gra, lived in the 18th century in Europe. He explains the verse as follows. I'm going to read the exact same verse with one slight change. Listen carefully. grace is false and beauty is vain. But in a woman who fears God, it is to be praised.
So that's the full circle. It's like you're saying, hold on, how do I say it? Truth is more important, but in that truth is the beauty. Like, it's not right, like you were saying.
Well,
before,
yes,
what
yes.
Is it beauty or truth? And you said truth, because the truth is the integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in the integrity is the beauty.
Exactly. Beautifully said. They go hand in hand.
Well, it kind of feels like a circle to me.
Yes.
It's like, yeah. But,
Exactly. So we can't just write off beauty. Beauty on its own is superficial. Exactly. But when it's accompanied by personal integrity, by truth, then there's something very valuable to beauty.
Then it shines.
Then it shines. Then it's praiseworthy. Why?
Because it has meaning. Because it has something behind it. Because if you just try to express something that's beautiful because of its beauty and that's all, it's different than if you want to express beauty to, let's say, make a mitzvah. Because the meaning behind that beauty, it's to praise God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only the beauty or the truth or the meaning, it's all together in us, in one woman who fears God. That's it. They're just gonna,
So you're saying the two are linked? They're not just two separate components to one person? And you're saying they're linked in the sense that the beauty is used to enhance her fear of God,
yeah.
as we were talking about before, building a beautiful home for God.
Yeah, exactly. I think it has to, as long as it has a purpose, non-selfish purpose, that's where the beauty shines the most. I think that's the meaning that I see in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, beautiful.
well,
Beautiful.
I also feel that, the temptation is for beauty to be an end of itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at in our society, the pursuit of beauty or the value we place on beauty as something to possess or something to exalt. Like what was, as you were speaking, what kind of kept going in my head was idol worship. I mean, it can be
Yes.
the end in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
An object of beauty is
Exactly.
worthy of being worshipped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the meaning that you're speaking about is that it's only the first step to opening the door to something deeper, which is where the true beauty lies.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think I'm hearing you say, yes.
Yes, and we actually are going to take this a step further. We're going to go even deeper into the
That's good.
what is deeper.
You're my life preserver.
let's we'll probe even deeper into the relationship, the interaction between truth and beauty. Let's go back to a minute to the concept of harmony, because we said that's what beauty is. Beauty is harmony. But I'm just wondering about something, because we mentioned that diversity is beautiful. Diversity creates harmony, and harmony is an experience of beauty. But diversity could also, as we said before, create divisiveness. How can we ensure that diversity leads to beauty, leads to harmony, and doesn't lead to divisiveness? So the key is truth. Truth. That's the key. Let me give you an example. We're about more than halfway through tonight's class, and we've mentioned all kinds of concepts. We've mentioned the crossing of the Red Sea. We mentioned Van Gogh. We mentioned the Mishkan. We mentioned the menorah. We mentioned art techniques. These seem to be very random ideas that we wouldn't really expect to associate with each other, to put in the same class. I mean, what does Van Gogh have to do with the splitting of the Red Sea, after all? Right? But when we get down to the essence of the class, the premise of tonight's class, the underlying truth, objective of tonight's class, then suddenly all these different ideas, which seem so random and disconnected, are suddenly related. In other words, what's the idea of tonight's class? The idea of tonight's class is that art expresses both meaning and beauty, and the interaction between them, the link between them, expresses something very deep about art, which we could apply to our own lives. That's basically the premise of this class. So all of a sudden, we know, oh, that's why I'm talking about Van Gogh, because he brings in the deeper element. When he paints, he uncovers a hidden truth, a deeper truth. That's why we're talking about the Red Sea, because that's when the Jews talked about beautifying God, making a beautiful home for God. Oh, they all start to fit together. They're all starting to create a harmonious whole, a harmonious class. So what is the link between truth and beauty exactly? It's the getting to the essence of something, of anything, of an experience, of an idea, of a person, of a relationship. When we boil down something to its bare bones, to its ultimate truth, then all of a sudden it becomes clear how all those details express that same truth and are part of the same whole. How all those details, yes, they're different. Those details are very different from each other, but because they're all expressing the same truth, they're also in harmony with each other. And that creates something beautiful. And this could be applied in so many ways. So let's start with art, which is the topic of tonight. So when an artist looks at something, an object, a scene, a person, they're looking at the soul, as we said before, they're looking at the deeper truth, and therefore all the elements of that piece of art will express that truth. The colors, the textures, the techniques. I'm sure you know better than me. I'm not an artist, but we have artists here. The reason why that picture is so beautiful is because all the elements that the artist is incorporating are expressing that same truth, that same meaning that the artist wants to express. And so there's harmony. And so it's beautiful. Same thing.
That's what you strive for.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's what we, in
That's why
general.
some
Let me
pictures
apply.
feel
Yes.
and others not as strong, because some do achieve it.
100%. I don't think it's natural for people to always look beyond the surface. But let's apply this concept to other areas of our life, and you'll see. Again, you'll notice it's not something that happens automatically for most people, but it's something to work towards. It's a goal. It's something to keep in mind, because then our whole life experience changes. So, for example, in a marriage, you have two people who are most probably very, very different. Just the fact that one's a man and one's a woman, there are already worlds of differences between them. Now, those differences could lead to problems, or those differences could create harmony and a beautiful marriage, a beautiful relationship. How could it be the latter and not the former? Well, if we look to what the essence of a marriage is, and those of you who were here last year at the Soulmates course, it was a course on marriage, you might remember this. In a Jewish marriage, the man and husband and wife actually share one soul. The soul of each is just a part of the same soul. So if you look at the essence of the marriage, it's really the coming together of two souls. They're really one at the essence. So even though there may seem to be all these differences, all these different personality traits, they're all expressing the very same soul, the essence of the man and woman that they share. And when you remember that, all of a sudden, you see harmony. The differences come together. They complement each other. And you have a beautiful marriage. Same thing on a communal level. You have different people living within a community, interacting with each other. Everyone's different, as we mentioned before. That could lead to terrible politics, terrible, divisiveness. But if people will put aside their own self-interests and focus on a common goal, a truth that they all share, then all those differences can complement together, can create amazing things. Or even on a deeper level, every person in the community shares something very deep. The truth of every person, which is the soul, is the same, because everybody has a soul. And so if we focus on that And instead of saying, oh, that person's so different than me, I can never get along with them, but think, oh, that person has a soul just like me, then our differences are coming from the same place. Let's let them complement each other, interact beautifully with each other, and then you have a beautiful community. And on the level of the world, of what God's expecting us to achieve, why God created us, when we talk about a beautiful dwelling place for God, what is this beauty that God wants of us? It's harmony. Because every single creation was created for the same reason, to bring godliness down to this physical world. And so when we interact with different creations, with that goal in mind, with that purpose in mind, we remember the meaning behind everything we do, which is to bring and reveal godliness in this world, then every single creation is sharing that purpose, is expressing that purpose. Boom, you got harmony. That is a beautiful dwelling place for God. That's the beauty God wants us to put into the world. This harmony, everything working together to express the same goal. So, in a nutshell, truth creates harmony, and beauty is the experience of that harmony. Or in other words, beauty is the experience of harmony which is produced through meaning. So like you said, there we have the full circle. And what's interesting is that the more truth, the more beauty. Because the more we probe, the deeper we probe to find the truth, and there's always going to be a deeper truth, because truth is infinite. God is infinite. And we're finite. So we're never going to discover the entire picture of truth. But we can always uncover a deeper layer. And when we uncover that, we can go a layer deeper and a layer deeper. And the deeper we go to uncover the essence of anything, the truth of anything, the more harmony will be achieved within its different components. And of course, the greater the harmony, the more the beauty.
Because it takes the components to make it.
Exactly.
Each one's like, I often felt that even when I was very young, that it's like a big puzzle. And I'm a piece in that puzzle. And it's like each of us are. And the puzzle isn't complete without me being in it. And I'm not complete without being in it with all the other parts.
And it's interesting because what you just made me think of is that in that sense, the harmony itself gives meaning. The fact that we are all a piece of the puzzle gives meaning to all existence. So you can look at it, it's a two-way street. Yeah, truth creates harmony, and harmony creates truth. Yeah, beautiful.
But the thing what you were saying before about the beauty on the earth, or the harmony bringing beauty, I would say that's Mashiach, no?
Yes, beautifully said. And that is exactly, in the bigger picture, why God created the world, because he wants us to get to that goal. And every single time we interact with a piece of this world in a godly way, that brings us a step closer to Mashiach. Because eventually what we want to achieve is this realization, this clear, obvious realization to every piece of creation that everything here is expressing godliness, and that will be apparent when Mashiach comes. But each time we do it, we're a step closer.
And our eyes are opening. If you're saying this is about shifting your eyes.
Yes.
Because, it's interesting, on some level we could talk about being a painter or a writer or whatever, but what I'm hearing here is it's really about shifting the way you see the world, and that could be,
Exactly.
as a business person, it could be anything. It could be no matter what you do, you could look at the world through the eyes of an artist.
Exactly, and that's really the whole point of this course. There's a letter here, it's text 6, I believe, that Renya brought up before. So Renya, what you mentioned before is that you have a friend who's an artist, and you said sometimes she does feel down, and you gave her this letter
She's
to read.
telling me that over 40, and what she can achieve in the world, what she can give. She was like the whole time thinking, and then I told her about this letter, and she read it, and also I said that it's not such a great idea to think what will be, just do what you feel now. And she creates beautiful paintings, and she's quite, she has her paintings already on loan in Vancouver Art Gallery, and she has many commissions. And she's working every day from 9 o'clock until 5, sometimes longer. She comes to Vancouver she has her studio here downtown, and every day goes by bike from Coquitlam here.
Oh, wow.
And back. But she's like,
amazing.
she actually lives on art, so she sells and she produces enough that she can sustain herself.
Wow.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Big achievement. But actually, this letter was really amazing when what the Rebbe is telling to the artist what he actually be like, what he can give to the world by his
Exactly. Yeah. So a bit of background to this letter that we're talking about. We're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, probably. This is a letter written by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of printed letters, correspondence between Lubavitcher Rebbe and all types of people. All kinds of people would write letters to the Rebbe about all kinds of issues, problems. The Rebbe would respond, and a lot of them are published. This particular letter was written to an individual named Hanoch Hendel Lieberman. He passed away in 1976, is no longer alive. He was an artist from the former Soviet Union. And you can imagine if he was living there, he struggled a lot. He struggled a lot with his identity as a Jew in the former Soviet Union. And he struggled physically, he struggled spiritually. He didn't have an easy life. And so he wrote this letter to the Rebbe, just expressing his difficulties, expressing his struggles. He was feeling a little bit down. And this is an excerpt from the response of the Rebbe to him. I'd like to read some of it together. It's quite long, so I don't think we'll do the whole thing. Let's start from part 2. It's actually divided into a number of parts because of its length. It's on page
28.
Thank you. It's a little, and my book is on 28. This time it works. Wonderful. It's also divided into 2 parts. Okay, so let's start from part 2. Would anybody like to read? Any volunteers? No pressure, you don't have to. I could read. You go ahead? Okay, thank you, Carolyn.
My throat's also
Stop whenever you need to. You can take over.
As you are surely aware, the primary talent of an artist is his ability to step away from the externalities of a thing and, disregarding its outer form, gaze into its innerness and perceive its essence, and to be able to convey this in his painting. Thus, the object is revealed as never before we have seen, since its inner content was obscured by secondary things. The artist exposes the essence of the thing he portrays, causing the one who looks at the painting to perceive it in another truer light, and to realize that his prior perception was deficient. And this is one of the foundations of man's service of his creator.
Okay, so the Rebbe establishes what an artist tries to achieve, which is what we've spoken about at length. And now, the next part of the letter, the Rebbe applies it to our relationship with God and the way we live our lives, basically. So the Rebbe continues, and he says, as we know from the Torah, and particularly from the teaching of Hasidism, the entirety of creation stems from the Word of God. And the Word of God is what brings it into existence and sustains it in every moment of time. It is only that the divine power of tzimtzum, which means constriction, holds the divine life force in a state of concealment and obscurity, and we perceive only its outer form, meaning the physical reality. We spoke a little bit about this too. This is our job. Creating a home means to reveal that inner divinity behind or under the facade of the physical world. Our mission in life, based on the simple faith that there is none else beside him, the divinity of God, only one God, is that we should approach everything in life from this perspective, that we should each strive to reveal as much as possible the divine essence in everything and minimize, to the extent that we are able, its concealment by the externalities of creation. In other words, harmony. Just like an artist sees something under the surface, everything in this world has something under the surface, and that's the spark of God. And our job is to create harmony amongst all of creation by revealing, expressing that spark of God in all of creation. And we do that by involving creation in our relationship with God, our service of God, as we spoke about before. So one must take great care, part 4, that secondary and external matters should not obscure the essentials of life and its ultimate purpose. A person might experience difficulties, trials, and challenges in separating the good from the bad, but these are but the means by which to achieve the purpose of life, that his soul should elevate itself through its positive deeds in this world. So one must never allow the difficulties in overcoming one's trials, or even the fact that one might occasionally fail and stumble, to overwhelm the joy that one must feel as a child of God. In other words, we need to find the meaning in everything. Because when we find meanings in things, it's not purposeless. We realize there's a reason, there's harmony. And it's, in fact, maybe a challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge. And, we get caught up in our daily grind, the mundane things we do every single day, our routine, and sometimes, we don't even think about it anymore. It's just, we just do it, we go through the motions. But if we take a moment, we stop, shift our focus a little bit, look beyond these robotic actions, these routines that we do every day, and we find a deeper significance to those motions, a deeper purpose, and suddenly it's a whole different experience. And I'll give you an example. As a wife and a mother, a lot of what I do are tasks that seem, endless and boring and not too exciting, not too stimulating. Shopping for groceries, then chopping up those groceries, chopping onions, chopping veggies, making salad, making supper, wiping noses, giving baths, breaking up fights. Doesn't feel very inspiring a lot of the time. But then I need to stop for a moment. I need to focus for a moment. Why do I go shopping for groceries? Why do I make supper? Why do I chop those onions? Why do I break up those fights and wipe those runny noses? Why do I do all of that? Well, I love my family. That's why I do it. I could just as easily, order takeout every night for supper. But I want my family to eat homemade, nutritious food. I want my family to feel my love. When I buy those groceries and cook that food, that is an expression of my love for my family. Because at the core, that's really what it's all about. When I break up fights and give the baths and do all those boring motions, one second, there's a purpose to those motions. What's the underlying truth? Oh, the underlying truth is love. So all those activities are really an expression of that love. And therefore, everything I do achieves this harmony. Because all this busyness is becoming united under a single umbrella of purpose. And that's beautiful. That's a beautiful experience. That's a beautiful way of living. What I'm going to ask you to do now, and we're going to end the class on this note, is on page, turn to page 32. There we go. There's a little exercise. Now this is, you do not need to share this. You may if you like, if you feel comfortable, but you do not have to. What this exercise is in part 1, write down an aspect of your life that you find ordinary and uninspiring. Okay, you could read through what it says there. They give you some ideas. part 2 is take another look at what you wrote in part 1 and try to identify a deeper purpose. If anyone does feel comfortable to share what they've written, please feel free. In the meantime, I'll just wrap up this lesson as we're coming now to the end, and perhaps some of you need to go. When we look for the deeper meaning in what we do, thereby creating harmony and achieving beauty, experiencing beauty, that is called using our innate artistic talent to make our lives a work of art. So yes, we can all be an artist. We can all achieve meaning, harmony, and beauty in what we do. Are there any questions or comments, anything you'd like to add or share?
I mean, it's a bigger question, and it is one I wrestle with a lot, I have to admit, spiritually. At the level you speak, nothing matters. Meaning, whatever job you have, it doesn't matter. Whatever spouse you have, it doesn't. Like, really, if you see the deep meaning in anything, it can serve. Like, am I making any sense?
Yes.
Yes. So, like, for example, you can be in a job that, like, I feel I'm in a job that I'm really grossly under-functioning. I can write all the things about it that have deeper purpose. So on some level I say, well, if it has all this deeper purpose, what difference is it if I'm there? Mm-hmm. But there's still another part that feels I'd love to be contributing more of myself that I could be contributing somewhere else. But with that kind of philosophy about finding meaning everywhere, then it doesn't really matter where you are.
Well,
No, like that's sort of the dance that I feel.
it's an excellent question. It's an excellent question.
I mean, I'm not quite the level of depressed artist at the but I'm just saying,
No, it's a very valid question. It's excellent. What I'd like to say is that finding meaning is different for everybody. No one's created the same. There's a reason why God created everybody differently. Everybody's created with their own strengths, their unique talents. And what a person really needs to ask themselves is, well, God created me this way. He created me with a talent in art or in music or in writing or whatever it is. If God gave me that particular talent or that particular personality, that is my purpose. So while it's very important, teachers are very important, so are doctors. So are, I'm getting a blank here, but anything, art, it doesn't matter what it is, any profession is important. So just because nursing is important, does that mean I need to be a nurse? I am so squeamish. I can never be a nurse. I can never be a doctor. But it's very important. There's a very high purpose, a lot of meaning in that. But it's not my purpose.
Right.
I have to look at where I find myself in my life. There's no accidents. If we find ourselves in a certain place, there's something to learn from it. There's a reason. If I am with this personality, with these talents, finding myself in this stage of life, in this place, all of those factors combine to be my purpose. Not your purpose, not anyone else's purpose, but my unique purpose. And so what I have to do is, if I find myself in a rut, look at what I'm doing and ask myself, what is my unique purpose in my daily grind, in my routine, in my actions? Now, sometimes a person finds themselves in a place where their daily grind is not really expressing their purpose. If someone is a very talented writer and is spending their whole day at a cashier in a mall or a supermarket, whatever it is, there's definitely a purpose to what they're doing. But it can't be their purpose because they're not expressing their purpose, and that's why that person might feel in a rut. On the other hand, you might have someone who's so social and so personable and so friendly. When they're working in that store, they feel they're fulfilling their life's purpose. They love it. They wake up every morning excited. So sometimes we have to examine, am I simply in a rut because I am going through life with my eyes half closed? Or am I in a rut because I'm not honest with myself about what my true purpose is, or I'm not aware of my true purpose is, and therefore I'm fulfilling someone else's purpose, but not mine? Does that answer your question?
Perfect.
Good.
And it also touches very deeply, because even this letter that we just read, years ago, I really felt that in a way, depression, or like you say, when we were very disgruntled with things, for me now it's sort of a place of where I've separated myself from God. Because if we knew in that place of oneness with God, there is no depression, there's only joy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I guess for me, thank you, it's just a reminder, if I can tap back into that place, then that trueness of purpose comes.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think it will be revealed in that place when I can tap into that place.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Is it what I sort of was hearing you say in that way?
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Would anyone else like to add anything?
I will add something.
Yes, please.
I've been in that place, and sometimes I've entered that place, and then I come out of it, and a couple years later, in that place again.
Yes. It's the journey.
I have seen for me a pattern very clear, and it's very magical, and it can be very dramatic. That when I go through this exercise, I say, I'm thinking, what? This isn't me. This isn't. This is not really my purpose. What am I doing here? Why is this happening to me? But when I examine and I go through this exercise of looking at the deeper meaning and trying to find the deeper purpose, usually I find it, and then it's like the light comes on in my mind.
Right.
And when I discover or realize how is that serving me in my growth as a person, that's when suddenly something changes. Like, aha, that's what it's
right.
for. That's what it's about. And then
Do you feel ready then to take another
then all of a
step?
sudden it's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
done. That chapter's because you learned what you need to learn, you know. And I found there's usually a magic. Either the thing disappears and something better comes along, or the thing changes somehow.
Different perspective.
Even externally, it's like a magical occurrence. You know? So
Wow.
Yeah, good.
I find
this
also,
is a very, very, very useful exercise.
yes, agreed.
Not just for bringing divine consciousness into your daily life, but also for transforming.
To be a happy person.
Yes.
Yeah, and I find it's, sometimes it's a real struggle. I gave that example of all the different details that are involved in being a mother. And a lot of those details I don't enjoy. And even, I stop and I remind myself of the meaning. Sometimes I have to do that over and over and over again, every couple of days or so, or sometimes every couple of hours if it's a rough day, or every 5 minutes, depends. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine, so I'm going back to this particular example, I can't imagine anything more meaningful in my life than being a mother to my children. So here we have an example of, yes, sometimes you do get in a rut. And sometimes it's really hard and it's really challenging. But in this case, when I really take a moment to reflect on what the purpose of that is, like you're saying, Carolyn, it's like magic. All of a sudden, those activities that seem so hard and so boring and so uninspiring and I'm so not motivated to do them, they take on a different meaning. And because, yes, sometimes the motions are not fun, and the motions might not become fun. I don't think I'm ever going to enjoy making supper. I really don't. But what I express through making supper, I can't imagine anything more meaningful. So, it's not a one-time fix. If, you find your purpose and you're good to go. Sometimes it's uphill sometimes. Yeah, and going deeper and deeper, exactly. And sometimes it's one step forward and then 2 steps back, and you keep doing it. But it definitely changes our experiences when we could identify the purpose in them.
Yes, but then you don't understand.
Exactly.
You understand this is here for your own growth. Not that I advertise that many years, but yeah, it's a great way to look at things, because then you do continue to evolve, to let go of negativity, which holds you back from
Yes.
shining for who you really are.
Yes.
And letting that magic, because you allow your higher self to open up to possibilities that you may not even have any idea what could happen from that.
Yep. Absolutely.
Did I do this? So it's almost like there's something bigger than me happening.
That's very interesting that you're saying that, because we'll discuss this more at length in the class. But from what I understand, I'm not an artist myself, but what an artist tries to do when he or she paints an object is to find the soul of the object, or the soul of the person, if you're doing a portrait or whatever it is. So that ties in beautifully. That's a very nice thought that you brought up. Thank you. What else?
I think it also tries to achieve meaning. So when you express some type of art, you try to portray your emotion. So whatever, if this is the painting that I created, the emotion behind it, it's what will give my life some meaning. Like I'm trying to express that emotion in something more physical instead of just ideas. And I guess it ties in with the meaning of what's behind not only the artist, but the person that's looking at the art itself.
Right.
Because, art can mean different things to different people,
True.
right? So it just kind of tries to grab the meaning of whatever it is you're feeling in that moment.
Okay, thank you. Beautiful. So you're saying another element to art, or what art achieves, is meaning.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, good. What else may art be trying to achieve?
I think that like in terms of like creation as like us being created beings, we like our job is to like reveal the godliness within creation, which was like concealed, and then like through art we can also reveal like the godliness within other aspects of things in the same way that we create in order for things to be revealed, like different whatever emotions, ideas within.
Exactly. Beautiful. So there's a, not only is an artist coming up with their own meaning necessarily, but there perhaps is some kind of godly meaning as well, like you're saying, Sydney, in what the artist is trying to depict. If I understood what you said correctly, is that right? Very nice.
For me, as art is a process, different things reveal themselves about myself and about what the product reveals back along the way. And I mean, if I had to link it now, what a thought that came to me is sort of like at the different level of the worlds. And in there, it's not always pleasant, my own experience. Sometimes it's a struggle. And sometimes...
And if you need more, I have more. There's some pens you can pass down as well. And Bella, can I ask you please just to place this somewhere in the middle? Exactly. Thank you. Perfect.
Sorry, I'm just going to drag it a little bit. Is that blocking the camera? Would that be blocking? Maybe.
It may be a little. We'll take it off after this exercise. I'm not going to leave it there for the whole class. Our voices will still come through. So. Okay. Again, I want to reiterate: do not worry if you can't draw. Really, it's in a way this exercise may work even better if you can't draw. So anyone could do this. Okay. What I'm going to ask you to do now is try to draw this menorah in the center of the table. When you are done with your drawing, I'll give you 2 minutes. When you are done, label that paper as drawing A and put it aside. Further instructions will be coming afterwards. Go ahead.
From our angle? Or what
However you like.
it would be?
However you like.
No marking. Do I have to sign my name?
You don't. You don't even have to show it to anyone.
I'm surprised by what happens because it's very much an interaction. And I mean, ultimately, it's like trying to seek truth and beauty, even though beauty may be awesome in a way that is not in what we think of as beauty. But it's when I feel in the end that there's something there, it's really an interaction, and it's more than I can be by myself or it can be by itself. And that's probably why art relates to different people in different ways too, because there's that interaction in any art form, whether it's a visual art or tactile art, like any form.
So you're saying there's an interaction between the artist and the art,
And
as well as all the elements used within the art.
Also at different levels of the world, like yes, physically, emotionally, on a level of transformation, on a level of something spiritual, at different times, different things. It's part of the whole process.
Right.
Being human and being in the creative process.
I like that word you use, interaction. He also mentioned a few other things, which we will picked up on some keywords, actually, concepts that we're going to develop tonight. You mentioned, first of all, how how art is self-expression, a form of self-expression. That's definitely, I believe, one of the objectives of art in terms of the artist, him or herself, is that element of self-expression. You mentioned also about the emotions within the artist. There's something there that the artist is expressing. You also mentioned there's the element of beauty in art that the artist is bringing out and connecting to, as well as the element of meaning you mentioned, and Bella, you mentioned that as well. So these are all excellent ideas, and I'm sure there are many, many answers to this question, and I'm sure different people have different answers, and different answers that speak to different people differently. What we'll do for this class is we are going to narrow down the elements of art to two different elements, both of which you ladies had mentioned. One is the idea that art expresses beauty, and the other is this idea that art expresses meaning, it expresses an idea. So let's begin. We will start with the element of meaning in art. And as part of our discussion, we are going to be doing a little workshop and a bit of interactive learning to start off with. Okay? So please help yourself to 2 papers and a pen. Here, let me pass these down. Welcome to the very first class of this year's Rosh Chodesh Society series. Welcome back to those of you who have been here before, and welcome to all the new faces. It's really nice to see you all here. The series is called Art and Soul. And the idea behind this series is exploring various art forms and uncovering the deeper aspect of what the artist tries to achieve in each of these art forms. And through doing that, through looking beyond the superficial, looking beyond the literal expression of the art form to the deeper sense of it, we will find that we are actually all artists or musicians or dancers or architects or whatever the art form is, when we apply that deeper element to our own lives. So tonight, the very first course, we will be looking at the art of painting and drawing. What you may discover tonight is that you are an artist. You can paint, you can draw, perhaps not literally, and you do not need to know how to literally draw or paint to be in this class, and the same goes for all the subsequent classes. But in a different sense, you may just discover the innate artist within you. So let us start with a question. What is art supposed to achieve? And I'm going to open this up for discussion. No wrong or right answers.
Well, I'll just like to share, I find when I'm in a creative process, I feel very close to God. Like I feel I'm connecting to a higher energy, a divine energy. Sometimes it just feels like it's coming from a place that's bigger than me.
Beautiful. So you're saying there is a godly or a spiritual element to arts or to creating.
For me, yes, very much so, yes. Like time flies, you know, like you don't even notice time.
Right.
Sometimes I'm just so deep in the process that when it's over, I go,
Okay. Label that drawing A and put it aside, please. Don't worry if it's not perfect. It's fine. For the purpose of this exercise, it's great. All right. Now take your second paper. And once again, you are going to draw this menorah, but without looking at your paper. Again, I'll give you 2 minutes. Go for it, and then label that paper drawing B.
Without looking at what?
Without looking at your paper that you're drawing on.
You look at the menorah, but not at your paper.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
It's hard not to look.
A little tip, it might help if you don't lift your pen from the paper.
If what?
If you don't lift the pen from the paper at all. Keep the pen on the paper.
I'm sure my wax would drip all over if I used this one.
Well, it's your interpretation of the menorah, right?
Yours would burn.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Keep that thought. I'm going to repeat that for everybody after. It's a good point.
Don't look at it.
I don't know where I am.